All right, welcome to Age of Gladiators Reforged. I'm going to try to make just one singular guide that will cover everything. So, when you're first starting off and you're making just starting a new campaign, obviously the portrait is just aesthetic, doesn't really matter. Name doesn't really matter. You can go female or male, doesn't really matter. The choices of origin is the first critical choice. So, the merchant is kind of bad, actually. So it starts you off with a lot of money, but then does nothing to help you the rest of the game. So if you're relying on the extra 350,000 denarii to get going and succeed, that means you're probably going to struggle even more once you get to the later stages of the game. The gladiator start is on paper good, but in actual practice, it makes the economic side of the game harder, at least early on, since the higher level and the more stats that your gladiators have, the more expensive it is to maintain. Now, you could say that this offsets the expense of having your stable or hiring trainers and paying them to get the extra plus 100% XP from each coaching and training. But the faster your gladiators level up, the harder the early game is going to be. And while it may be very beneficial late game, I've found that just recruiting good enough gladiators and then, using them to great success is generally better than them getting a higher level. In part because with equal stats, a lower level gladiator is usually cheaper. Scout is the first of the picks that I would say could be potentially valuable. The alternative to having perfect fighter evaluation is kind of trusting your scouts or your recruiters and hopefully getting some good gladiators just naturally. But having the perfect fighter evaluation lets you make much more informed decisions with how you spend your money to recruit fighters. That said, it's not one I usually go with because even if you don't get even if the gladiator stats were misrepresented, it's very easy if you're being smart about about the expenditures you have. It's very easy to recover from buying a bad fighter by just firing them and buying another. Doctor, I would say, is one of the best of the starting choices. Not so much because you don't have to then pay for doctors as much, but more so because no sickness means there will never be a time where the gladiators you had intended to use in upcoming fights are suddenly sick and you can no longer safely put them in the fights. And the 75% injury recovery is nice. It's just nice. This is the equivalent of having 4 very well-trained doctors all at once. So that's a very strong choice. Showman will help you get reputation faster and will let you get fame faster. So one of the benefits of that means you reach the point in the game where your gladiator recruits start being cheaper and cheaper much more quickly. And it also allows you to skip ahead much quicker because the 2 requirements to skip a town or to leave town and go to the next stage of the game, the 2 things you have to have is the money to be able to do it without just defeating all of the bosses and shutting them all down in the town. And you have to have enough, I believe it's reputation. Or no, I think it's fame that lets you skip to the further towns, and then reputation's what lets you get... Regardless, in general, this lets you get cheaper gladiators faster. It lets you get to the next towns faster if you decide to go the way of just paying for it. And you get the 50% fight purse increase. That said, the majority of the money you're going to make over the course of a playthrough is from betting on your gladiators rather than from the fight purses. So the 50% fight purses isn't as much of a benefit as it initially sounds. That said, again, getting the cheaper gladiator purchases faster is nice. The discounts that you get from buying gladiators and whatnot is very nice. But you will eventually get it anyway, regardless of what you pick. Whereas Negotiator, in my opinion, is the best, just because The bonus morale means even if you lose some fights here and there, or even if you're not giving them any cut of the purses, they're going to be happy. The fighter and staff salary saves you, by the end of the game, so much money. And the fighter and staff cost means you can afford to invest more early on into multiple fighters, into some staff, etc. So, in my opinion, the two best are definitely Doctor and Negotiator. Doctor helps just eliminate some RNG, but part of the reason I say Negotiator is just hands down the best is because it doesn't matter if your gladiators are getting sick or injured if you have twice as many gladiators, which is what the minus 50% fighter salary and minus 50% fighter cost basically means. You can afford to have twice as many fighters as normal. I like putting female gladiators on, in part because there are a very limited number of gladiator art pieces, so just to have less of a chance of all the gladiators looking very similar, I turn female gladiators on. Weak economy will make it more challenging, so it does make it so that it's harder to make, to with the same activity, it's less financially beneficial. Player perks, on or off, doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't change the game that much at a core level, but Let the Gods Decide absolutely does. So if you let your gladiators just have their points assigned with the automatic system, you're going to get less optimal gladiators than if you pick yourself. Side quests, I honestly don't really care. I pretty much never actually go for them. But if you like a little bit of random whatever coming in, it's fine. Fighter transactions, I actually forgot to mention this in my video of what changed between the original and the remake. Fighter transactions don't matter anymore. Like, yes, you can potentially buy a gladiator from one of your opponents, but you have no idea what level they are until you buy them and find out that the reason their stats are okay is because they're already level 12 or whatever. It's just, buying fighters doesn't really come into play much, and selling fighters is no longer viable in the least. They're offering you next to nothing, even for gladiators that have amazing records, high stats, it doesn't matter. So fighter transactions is kind of whatever. Death messages is, do you want a more sanitized story of how the gladiators are dying in the fights? Kind of, again, doesn't really matter. So we're going to go with the Negotiator. Then again, I think I'll show Doctor, because it's still, the core basic concepts remain the same. They absolutely remain the same, even if you're running Doctor versus Negotiator. It's just Negotiator, you're a little bit more economically free to do a few things. So we'll start with Doctor, and in we go. At the start of the game, you're going to have 2 gladiators every time you start. These gladiators are going to each have randomly generated weapons and armor. So we've got a 17 for. The lowest that this type of armor can be is 15 base, and the highest is 20 base. So 17's middle of the pack. 19 is almost best. It's actually really rare to get a 20 with the 4 stamina armor, so 19 is really good. Likewise, Gladiuses tend to, or I believe the highest I've seen before blacksmiths come into picture is 49. So this is a very high-end Gladius, whereas this is a very low-end Sparta. These things can have, I think the highest I've seen was like 110 or something base before the blacksmiths touched it, whereas 91 is almost as low as a Sika. So that's kind of the first thing to look at, is what equipment do you have, and then what gladiators did you start with. So the stats that you're looking at is in part how effective they are in a fight, and also in part how expensive they are. So whenever you're looking at hit points, anything below 300 is kind of like risky to run, just because if you're dealing with Spartas that have 100 damage per hit, 200 hit points is basically 2 hits, and then they're dead. So 300 is really like minimum, I would say, for like a comfortable gladiator to bring into fights with other gladiators. That said, having weaker gladiators that have maybe 200, 250 for health to put against animals can actually potentially give you a viable way to reduce the rating of the gladiator and get more money from betting on animal fights. Then the next thing you look at after hit points is the two primary build paths: dexterity, strength, and agility, reflex. Those are the two kind of primary ways to build a gladiator. So this gladiator has 14 dexterity, meaning the dexterity strength path isn't really viable, but he does have 46 agility, 42 reflexes, which means going with a focus build could actually work really well for him. Our other gladiator has 350 hit points, so 40 extra hit points is actually kind of significant. And the dexterity is a 31, strength is an 85. So with a little bit of investment in stats, we could potentially get him to the point where he's able to go a strength dexterity build. But he's going to take some levels to get there. His agility and reflexes are 1821, so kind of low. But that's fine, because low agility and reflexes means there's no downside really to bringing the biggest, heaviest armor you can get. So we have two okay gladiators to start with. It's very rare that you're going to start off with one of your two gladiators being really good. But the other thing to look at is their age. So we have a 17-year-old here who is developing, and we have a 31-year-old here. So every time November 15th comes around, I don't even know how to say that, Gizalrico is going to lose 5% off of every stat except intelligence. And you'll notice I didn't say anything about intelligence yet, or stamina. We'll get there in a second. So, 31, anything 29 or older, whenever their birthday comes around, they're going to lose 5% off of every stat. Meanwhile, the opposite is true for developing. Any developing gladiator is going to gain 5% to every stat except intelligence. You've got the greed, which I'll touch on later, doesn't really matter, and you've got the work ethic. So the work ethic is partially how much experience they gain every day. So diligent, he's going to level up faster because of that than unconcerned. This is where intelligence comes in. The only thing intelligence determines is how much experience they gain from daily training. So the fact that Barbados is unconcerned but has 65 intelligence means he's actually likely to level up faster than diligent with 12 intelligence. That doesn't really matter, though, because in a long enough timeline, everyone's going to level up to max level eventually anyway. So I largely disregard intelligence and, to a degree, disregard work ethic, just because the longer it takes for your gladiators to level up, the less you're paying them until they do. So the goal at the start of the game is to get gladiators that are effective at the lowest level possible as fast as possible. So, with all that being said, that's what you're looking at with your gladiators. The next step after you look at the gladiators you have is to immediately go to staff, hire every single smith regardless of what they are. Now, if they ever patch it so it doesn't work this way anymore, okay. But for now, just hire every smith you've got and hire every single scout there is. This is a very small investment. Yes, you're starting with around 70,000 and you're spending probably around 2,000 on average to hire all of these people. But there's one specific thing that you're looking for. When you go to recruit, you're going to look at all of the people, and you're going to look at their ages first. You're going to look at their ages and how much they cost. Because how much they cost is actually the best indicator for what their stats actually are, regardless of the evaluation skill of the scout. So if we're looking at Stolo here, that's 3,000 denarii to hire him. But I'm going to immediately do it, even though I'm going to probably fire him after for this one specific reason. We just got another really good Gladius, and we just got the best Specutor or Secutor that you can get. He's horrible, though. He is absolutely atrocious. So we're going to go, before he even gets to our stable, we're just going to free him. Because we didn't hire him for him. We hired him for that equipment. So now, any equipment at the end of the round, which we're going to disarm the two guys we started with as well, before we end the turn, because the first round that you gain possession of a weapon or armor, if it's in just your stable, your smiths will work on it and improve them that one time. And you can kind of imagine where we're going with this. We're going to put all the equipment that we've gained into our stable. In turn, all of our smiths are going to work on it. Then we're going to fire every single smith. So that way we start off with actually very respectable equipment. And you can tell if you go and look. Here's a Spatha, 109 for 21,800. 45 gladius. So each of our gladiuses that are around 44, 45, that's 9,000 denarii each. That we're not paying. That we're just getting from hiring gladiators. Likewise, the Murmillo that we have that's 19 for would be around 24, 25,000. So hiring gladiators, you, first off, are getting potentially a gladiator that you might be able to use. And second off, you're getting equipment for everyone that you hire. So, likewise, we're going to hire Naso here. He's under 5,000. Basically, anyone under 5,000 is very much worth hiring just to see what equipment they come with. All right. So, he came with a much less impressive gladius, but 15 out of 3 is the highest I've seen on these. So, this Thrakes is actually a really high-tier Thrakes. We look at him, and again, he's only got 200 hit points. He's got very low on everything, so we're going to also free him. You can keep one really, really bad gladiator specifically for wolves, because I believe wolves are the lowest rated animal. So by having a really low-rated character, you can put them in against a wolf and still get a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio to get a lot of money off the 600 gold side bet. But we'll get to that in a bit. For now, we're still working on just getting our initial stable set up. So as I said, these guys both have 300 plus hit points. They are adequate for me to work with. 85 strength, so his attacks, every attack, no matter what weapon he is or isn't using, is going to have an extra 42 damage. So if we can get his dexterity up, his strength is actually respectable, so we'll be able to get a lot of damage out of every hit. The fact that he also has 57 stamina means we don't have to really deal with that too much yet. But in general, you're just mostly looking to see how old are they. Because we're going to keep him around for a long while. Even though his stats are pretty meh right now, after he's gained some levels, and then his birthday rolls around, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. So we've got 9 months for him to just level up before his 5% increase comes around for turning 18. So we'll definitely be able to get a lot of stats out of that, including 5% health, which now that since you only gain 1 hit point per point spent on health, the best way to increase your health is through just letting the birthdays roll around and having 5% of 350 get added in. Very nice, especially since 5 points per level is what you normally get. Trying to keep a pretty brisk pace going here. So we're actually going to disarm him because I think we're going to use Giselrico. Using the higher aged gladiators first and faster is generally advisable, so that if anything does happen and they do get injured or whatever, it's a lot easier to let go of somebody who's 31 than somebody who's 17. So we're going to probably be tossing him in against the animal. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. But then again, I don't know. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Also, he's 1-to-2. Right, we can only bet 400 against the Panther. So he's 1-to-2 against the Panther, but he should be fine, probably. And one trick to try to just lose as few gladiators as possible is to go defensive. So the trade-off here, if you go aggressive, both of the fighters deal additional damage. If you go balanced, they both do regular damage, and if you go defensive, they both deal less damage. So the faster a fight ends, the less rounds that pass, the less fatigue your gladiators will get. But also, if you're going aggressive, you're risking more of the potential for injuries if you take most of your health. But since he does have 300 hit points, and Panthers usually have less than 200, pretty much always have less than 200, and since we know he's got a good gladius, he's going to be doing about 70 damage per hit, plus 30% because the aggressive. So, yeah, we're going to take away the fight purse. We don't need to worry about morale as long as we win. And we're going to let him go. Now, hopefully, he actually lands enough hits. He is not landing a single... Ah, that's right, his dexterity is incredibly low. And he doesn't really have the stamina to consistently dodge and block. But that's fine. You don't have to win every fight. Although I do wish I hadn't lost that 400, but it's fine. It's completely fine. The important thing is not losing whenever you actually go and fight people. So he's injured for 5 days. He's got 14 days of fatigue. It's fine. It's completely fine. So, more importantly, we have finished the fight, so we're going to disarm him. We've got all that stuff. We have the smiths ready to improve our weapons and armor. We're not going to actually hire any doctors until we see one that has 400 or higher on both sickness and injury. Because there's a base cost, and then the cost increases based on the skill of the doctor. So the most effective way to get as much injury and sickness resistance as possible for as cheap as possible is to just get 1 or 2 really, really good doctors that then proceed to level up over the course of your playthrough, rather than buying some bad doctors. You can see it's still 179, 52 sickness, 307 injury. Or you can pay about 20 or about 120 more, so not even double that, for triple the sickness and 50% higher on the injury. It just, the higher the stats are, the better the deal is. Same thing with trainers, but especially, you don't want a trainer immediately. Because the trainer, in addition to their cost, they're going to make your gladiators level up faster, which is actually a bad thing. You do not want your gladiators leveling up before you start gaining the fame and reputation to be able to get them cheaper and to be able to pay less in upkeeps. But yeah, this would absolutely be a great coach to grab, and we might grab him right before the new staff comes, because he's going to be available for the next 29 days. So if we're in a good financial position to hire him, he would absolutely be the one that I would hire for now. And probably for a while, because the odds of another 400 coming along would be pretty low. In any case, let's go back to the hiring. We have 59,672. And as you saw, we need 400 to 600 to bet on the animal fights. We'll need more to bet on the actual gladiator fights. But our primary focus here is ignoring the old people. The old gladiators are just going to get worse every time. And there's a chance that you hire them and their birthday is like 3 days later. So you actually get even lower stats than you initially think you are. But Solanus here, he's rated at A- for dexterity. And Regulus actually has a high grading accuracy. So 463 is about 50% grading accuracy. So there's actually a decent chance that that is close to an A. The others, being D's and C's, could actually be wrong. So Regulus here could be rating them below what they're at. But even if he doesn't, even if the rating is worse, or like the actual stats are worse, he is 16. Which means if he sticks around for most of our playthrough, he's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, yes, it does take a while to get through a year in its entirety, but again, his birthday could be March 3rd or 2nd, and we could immediately get a bonus to his stats right then. You can tell, since he's at 13,000 cost, he's not nearly as good as the 23,000 cost. But he is young, so he will continue developing over the course of the playthrough. He apparently has high dexterity, so we're going to go ahead and... it's kind of a little bit of a gamble grabbing him, but we're able to now look. So yes, the rating was a bit off. A bit really off. So we've got 46 on dexterity, 38 on strength. Everything is pretty bad. We got a low-tier Myrmilio. We got an average, above-average Gladius. So we still got, even though we paid for the Gladiator, hoping that he had decent stats, we did get a Gladius and a Myrmilio for cheaper than if we had bought them from the market. Even though the Gladiator we got's kind of whatever, he is good enough, I think, to hold on to. Again, if only to throw against animals. The 46 dex means he has a 23% chance to hit, or it actually shows, yeah, there, 23% chance to hit. Low, but manageable. And the 279 health is enough to deal with the weaker animals, not necessarily bears and lions, but it's acceptable. So now we're at 3 that we're keeping. And now we've got 46,500 left. And I think I'm going to take Macia here because she's 7,000 and hope for a good weapon. That's a terrible... Actually, that's, I think, the lowest a Sparta can possibly be. And that's also the lowest a Ramillo could be. So we got unlucky with our bet. But, that said, she actually has 58 dexterity. So, not terrible. We could work with her if we just so choose. And that's kind of the point with the ones we're getting now. These are we are going to see if we can work with them. And then once we've picked up one last fighter, we're going to look for a really good fighter. So Sura here is age 22. That's good. That's good. We will be able to use them for a long, long time. Regulus here, he kind of let us down last time, but this time he's saying A minus an intelligence, which is kind of bad because that means he's going to level up a lot faster than we would like. D for dexterity, but BBB for stamina, agility, reflex, and A for strength. And the fact that he's more expensive, the most expensive here, means he's likely, not guaranteed, but likely to have the highest stats of any of these characters. That said, he's also going to have the highest upkeep cost. So for now, I'll think about him, but we're going to move on to the next scout, who only has a 144 evaluation. So the odds of these people actually being anywhere near where he's thinking they are, like, even though this is A plus, A plus, A plus, A plus, A plus B, for 34,000, he could be so completely wrong, and we could be getting a 29-year-old gladiator with awful stats, which is basically worthless for 34,000. Not worth it. And honestly, just because his valuation is so low, I don't think I'm going to trust any of these. I mostly just hired him for any cheap gladiator I could grab to get equipment off of. Tubertus here, we have a 315, so not the worst evaluation, but not as reliable as Regulus here. But we've got 24,000 for a 19-year-old who is still developing, who apparently has an A for strength and dex and intelligence, B on agility, and then C on stamina. So, pretty good spread of stats. If it's accurate. If Rolus didn't mess up here. And you can kind of ignore what they say. Not a bad talent, but not a great one either. Fine fighter, will make you some coin, hire him. Like, yeah, I've experimented a lot, and these do not seem to actually have much to do with the gladiator themselves. That has more to do with the evaluation and the things that he says about them. But I'm thinking Tubertus is actually probably the best prospect here. Even if the stats are off, he is 19. So after his first birthday, he's going to gain 5% on everything. Whereas the majority of the rest, aside from Sura, are older. Or just, worse. That said, actually, B+, if he is actually B+ strength and A- dex, with A and B on reflex and agility, he could be interesting. So Plancus is actually also one to consider, especially since he does have the higher evaluation of the two of the scouts. But I think I would rather, if possible, have the A, dex, and strength. That said, again, the higher evaluation does make me, because that's 50% higher evaluation than the other scout. And he's 20 instead of 19, but I believe, based on my experimentation, that you still gain stats when they're 20 moving to 21. And he does have pretty solid spread, but I think... Yeah, so here we got B on dex for them. I want one high dex gladiator, preferably that also has high strength and acceptable stamina. So I think I'm going to grab Tubertus, and survey says we have a above average Sika, a above average of the Secutors, and we've got a Gladiator that has 300 health, which again is like the bare minimum that I'm willing to deal with. Only a 36 intelligence, which is fine. Again, we don't really care about intelligence, especially for the first few we buy. Later in the game, it is nice to have a higher intelligence on Gladiators so you can get them leveled up faster once you're in the later cities. But for now, we want them to level up kind of slowly. But he has a 45% hit chance because of the 90 dex. He does an extra 42 damage per hit because of his 84 strength. His stamina's a bit on the low side, but he does also have 58 agility. So he is an acceptable gladiator. Predatory is very common whenever you're dealing with the most expensive gladiators available. The higher their greed is generally the more you pay for them. The lower their greed is, generally the less you pay for them. So it is possible to get a gladiator that has better stats for cheaper if they're, for example, unselfish compared to predatory. He's also lazy, but that's fine. Again, we're not trying to level up too fast with our first set of gladiators. And now we're down to 15,000. And again, we don't really want to spend every penny we have. We could also have bought Tertus here to get another armor and weapon. And we could also spend the 10,000 on Aquila for the same reason. But it's generally not a great idea to go burning through all of your money. So, we have already fought the animal for the day. We've pulled all the weapons and armor off of everyone. We are not touching our stable. You do not want to upgrade your stable until you are financially solid. So, we are now going to go into staff, go to manage, and everyone who is not 400 or higher on evaluation just instantly fire. Because at this point, we don't care about how many gladiators they're offering us. All we care about is their evaluation. So we are going to keep Regulus here. Because as we gain money, as we go along, paying $355 a day to have an opportunity to get a gladiator that I would call a project gladiator, basically a developing gladiator that has 500 plus hit points and respectable stats across the board, is kind of, you want one at some point. You want to get one, preferably earlier than later. But looking through, we've got a December birthday. She's actually declining, so Macia is going to be one of the ones we get rid of first. She's low stats, she's declining. There is an argument to be made for just firing her immediately instead of wasting the 173 denarii a day, because we are likely to fire her first once we do find another gladiator, or we even have an opportunity for another gladiator in 14 days. Also, arguably, once we get 23,000, it might be worth investing in Sura, or if we get 20,000, 21,000, it might be worth investing in Plunkus here. And actually, for that reason, because we have two really interesting prospects, I am going to go ahead and fire her. Again, we got her weapon and armor. So even though they might not be great weapon and armor, we got them. So we've got Solanus here. Basically, we need to throw him at animals. Barbatus here, we basically need to throw him at animals. And Gisalrico, his stats are atrocious. It is worth noting the stats show the current, but not the max. The only way you can know what their max is either writing it down outside of the game or having it maxed out. And you never want to max out stats on a developing gladiator, because then you're just losing 5% of whatever that stat would be every time his birthday comes around. Whereas if they're already past 29, or if they're at or beyond 29, then they're going to be a losing stat, so you might as well max them out and get as much use as you can. So I know that's a lot that I've already covered before doing really anything. But yeah, Tubertus here is definitely our best gladiator thus far. 45% hit chance, 42 damage per hit, 300 hit points. It's not great, but it's manageable. It's acceptable for the moment. So we basically have 4 gladiators we're okay with, and now we begin to wait for them to arrive. But here's the big thing that gets you off to a great start. So again, 20% smiths. And if I'm going to just do this. You don't have to, but I'm going to go ahead and sort these by weapon type. And then by damage. So we have 45, 47, 44, 43, 36. So again, we have a Gladius that's max 47, minimum 36. And over here, we're going to do the same thing with the armor, just sort it in order. Mostly just to demonstrate exactly how the blacksmiths really matter. All right. So we've got a 19.4, we've got a 9.2. You can rewind it once you see what the gladiator or what the what the blacksmiths do. But we in turn, so that's the first day changed. We now have Gladius's 56 to 43. We have a 109 Sparta. We have a 10-9 or a 10-2 Secutor, and we've got a 22-4 and a 24 and a 19-4. So it made our 19-4 go up to 22-4, which is just way better. And then we've got the 19-4, which was previously the highest we had, but now we've got 3 that are at or above that level. And then again, just the 10% instead of 9%, and now this Secutor that wasn't so great is now the best Secutor we can just buy straight. And this is the point where you can go in and, once again, fire all the blacksmiths. If you have one that's over 400, again, might be worth holding on to, but the more of these people you fire, the cheaper your expenses are each turn. So, blah, 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 blah. You do not take out a loan to get a start. Do not take out a loan to get a start. It's going to be difficult to actually get the principal to pay this every single day. It's best to just get there's the ledger, get your ledger as cheap as possible for the start. So we only need to make 1,300 per day to break even with things as they are. And that's literally just because we're keeping the scout. If I had gotten, I would say, 2 really promising gladiators with really high base stats, I would even have fired the scout. I would have even fired the scout that we have left. Because if you have good enough gladiators that you can send into a fight with other gladiators knowing they're going to win, especially if you're playing as a doctor, so injuries are going to be 75% shorter and sickness will not happen, it could be very much worthwhile to have the 2 really good gladiators, 3 okay gladiators, and then just fire every single one of your scouts. But since we don't have that, I did keep this scout around specifically so that we have, especially the Plancus there is really interesting. The A Dex and the B Strength. And the Sura there is very interesting because, well, it's a very good defensive build. If this is accurate, A, B, B plus B. So low dexterity doesn't matter if you're able to build a really defensive build, assuming he has enough hit points, which I have no way of knowing that right now. But the last thing you would ever want to do is take out a loan on the first couple days to just get gladiators you can't afford to pay the upkeep for. All right, and with that done, we're not going to upgrade anything. The first city, don't upgrade anything. You're literally better off just trying to find better gladiators than you are trying to make your gladiators level up to be okay. So, with that out of the way, we're not touching the staff. Again, in 28 days, we may hire Avidus here, because that's going to be one of the best starting stats for a trainer. But that's 477 a day. So that's almost a 50% increase to our daily costs for our gladiators to get stronger faster, which then means they'll cost more per day. So we're going to hold off as long as we possibly can before deciding to get him. Again, recruiting I already covered. The market, don't ever buy anything new. Just use secondhand weapons and armor until you have enough money to really be able to. Yes, it would have been nice to have this 109 that would then have gotten upgraded to like 130 or whatever. That said, it's not worth 24,000 at all. But that's literally a more promising gladiator that would give us better stats and make us more likely to win. Even the Gladius 45, not worth it. None of that's worth it. So, yep. Now we just continue with the animals. We've got a bear. We've got 1-to-1. Oh, wait. We need to give him weapons and armor. Haha. So, yeah. Everyone kind of has bad reflexes and agility except for Tubertus. 58's acceptable. So I think I would give Tubertus the Secutor for now. because there's a chance he might actually dodge. And then the other 3, they all have very, very low chance of dodging. So we're going to give them the Murmillos. The only downside to a Murmillo is the stamina cost, and if you're never blocking or dodging, then the stamina cost doesn't do anything. So then you're just getting damage reduction for nothing. Right, he's injured, so we can't actually look at his stats. Also, yes, generally, if you add together all of the stats except for intelligence, you can see basically what their base stats level is, and that total can be anywhere as low as like 74, 75, all the way up to, I think, 400-ish is the highest I've seen as a starting place. Maybe a bit higher. So you just add them together. So his, for example, would be 85 plus 18, so that's 103. And then 160, 181, 182, 212. So he's actually like not terrible. He's a little below average as far as like the potential of what we could have gotten, but again, it's fine. So 212 and then 352 hit points, that's adequate. That's acceptable. And then you can actually go through and add them all up and see who is the most valuable. So 76, 110, 125, 150, 163. So he's a little bit worse. And Tubertus here is 174, 209, 267, 288. Yeah, 288 with 303 hit points. So he is better, though not much better. And then Gizlerico, I didn't look at his stats before we started. So I think we're going to give Tubertus here. Oh, no, that's right. He's the one that has a chance of dodging. If you can build up dodge and block chance on characters that have kind of low hit points but have, high whatever, it can be worthwhile. But we're definitely going to give him a Gladius so that he uses as little stamina as possible to attack. So his attacks will now do 98 damage per hit. With a 45% hit chance, that's pretty good for the first city. Here we have a 23% chance to hit with 15 stamina. Oof. That's not going to be great. So we're going to give Barbados the highest of the armors because we want to protect him since he's also a bit better. He has 57 stamina, so we don't really have enough stamina. If you use a Spatha, every attack is going to take 10 stamina, which means he'll get 5 swings before he runs out of stamina. Alternatively, if you're using a Gladius, it's only 8. So with 8, he'll get 5 swings and still have 17 left. So he'll be able to get 7 swings before he has to recover the first time. So Gladiuses are very helpful unless their strength is terrible. So for example, the 38 strength, even if we give him the Sika, which has 67 instead of 52, he still does less damage. So we're actually going to give him not that Spatha, that Spatha. So his attacks when he hits are still going to do respectable damage. But because of his stamina and because of his low dexterity, he's not super likely to hit. Which means he's potentially going to die. And if we give him a very... this is the least valuable armor we have. Because it's lower than just base armor that we could get, potentially. So we're just going to leave that just like that. And then we'll wait until Gizlerico is no longer injured to decide what equipment to give him. So with those choices available, we then go to our second exhibition match. And you'll notice that it was the bear the first time I clicked on it, and now it's the lion or the tiger. So, our odds of winning are now lower, but that also means if we do win, then we would get more money. That said, I kind of want the bear back. Or wolf. Wolf is actually great. Even though we're at 2-1 now, so our payout's going to be lower, we're still more likely to win. So, I think I actually want to go aggressive on him. Because of his low hit chance, the odds of us hitting repeatedly is pretty low. But if we go aggressive, there's a chance we kill the wolf in one hit. So, here we go with that. And there we go. Exactly the point I was making. So the wolf got hit one time. It was a 15% hit chance, and we killed him in one hit. Now, the nice thing is, since that was a 3-round fight, he's only fatigued for 5 days instead of being fatigued for more. Like, Gisorico was 14 days, I think. And since he won, he also got experience, which means we can now go in. And I also, whenever I start a campaign or whenever I'm playing through it all, I like to have a spreadsheet up just because I enjoy spreadsheets. And I actually will type in all of their stats into a spreadsheet to keep track of, one, what they are without whatever fatigue or whatever's going on. Because I can't really tell exactly what his stats are. I can see what's lower and higher, so I can kind of figure out what I want to do with it. But at the same time, you don't really have a full picture unless they are no longer injured or fatigued. So with that in mind, whenever I level him up, I'm going to look. I remember he has very high strength. And if I can get his dex up, he could actually be potentially a good fighter. So we're going to go there. He is 17, which means he's going to be useful, especially later. So we can either invest in the immediate success, which, if we're putting points into dexterity, focus would be terrible for him, because the more you miss, the better focus is, and the less you miss, the worse it is, because it gets reset, I believe. Based on what I've seen, it appears to be reset when you hit. So if you have a 50% hit chance, you're probably going to hit before the 5 or more misses required to trigger focus. So focus is literally just they have less than 30 dexterity, you start using focus. Blocker and dodger don't really matter until they have a high enough chance to block and dodge regularly. Rage, again, if you're not missing, you don't want to use it. Crit chance and crit damage are really bad until they have a high enough hit chance to regularly be hitting. You don't want to bank all of your success on the first hit. Although if you have a high enough dexterity, that is a potential choice of hey, I'm going to get my first hit in, that's going to be a crit, that's going to do 300 damage, and kill them in one hit. So, especially for people who start off with low stats, it can be very much worthwhile to grab Fast Learner to try to get them to a respectable level faster. But you have to keep in mind the extra 2 stats per level does mean that their upkeep is going to increase as well. Another option is just giving them damage reduction or deafness, because everyone attacks. Everyone always attacks. And having reduced stamina cost per attack is very helpful, especially if their stamina is middle of the field or lower. So deafness is always good. He only, if I remember correctly, Barbados has 350 hit points. So having an extra 2% damage reduction is not going to help that much. Because you have to consider damage reduction as effective health. And the lower their base health, the lower the effective health increase is going to be from getting % damage reduction. So for him, specifically the way he is now, I'm going to invest in deafness. Because, again, if we can get him down to, if we can get him 5 points into deafness, that means every attack is going to be 1 plus whatever his weapon is. So with his, I think, 60 base stamina, he will be able to get in, if we get deafness to max, he will be able to get in 20 attacks before he runs out of stamina. Which is good. Which is probably most fights early game. So, that's all we do for this turn, and we continue on. And you can see, I am losing money every turn. Every single turn, I'm spending 1,300, and I'm only earning... here we go. Earnings. Lifetime earnings. We started with 70,000 so far in the first, 3 days? Because we lost one and then we won one. We have made 1464, which is, not ideal. That's less than what we're losing every day. Or no, it's actually a little bit more. But this is the whole idea, is you keep your costs really low. Your gladiators will still level up over time. You're only going to have a couple of fights a month until you start sponsoring matches. And then fighting the animals is the most reliable way to make the difference between, the cost per day and the rewards you're getting. I know I'm saying a lot, but whatever. So, yeah, that's basically the start. And now after the next day, we're going to have Silanus and Tubertus arrive. But you can still enter into a fight with an exhausted gladiator. And if you are willing to take the risk of losing the side bet, you can potentially make enough money to offset your entire day of expenses. So you can see with one hit, because of the way he's built and because we went aggressive, he was able to kill the bear and we got 1,450. Plus 77 because he killed the bear, which you basically always kill the animals. So we made 1,500 and we spent for the day 1,300. So we're actually making a marginal profit even when we're only fighting the exhibition matches against animals. And that is the key to setting up for a successful early game. It's not fast, and the gladiators, you're going to be dealing with low stat and low skill gladiators for a while. But it's fine. Because as you go, they'll get a little bit better. And once you actually start fighting, I'm not even going to go all the way there. But once you start fighting, you'll see the enemy's gladiators are just as bad. 28 dex, 177 hit points. As you saw, we can do 170 damage in one hit. So if we hit first with I think we're up to like 50 before the fatigue is considered. I think Barbados' dex is up to 50. So we'll have a 25% hit chance to do the whatever damage that we've been doing to the animals. And the only chance that particular gladiator would have of not dying in basically one hit would be if he does dodge or block, which is a 15 or 16% chance and a 12% chance, assuming he has the stamina. If they don't have the stamina, if they are currently below the required stamina or already exhausted and recovering, they will not be able to dodge or block. So the fact that he also only has 26 stamina means we're probably going to win no matter who we put against him. Whereas some of the enemies, you have to really pay attention, like Novulus here, 474 hit points, which is scary, 114 dex, which is that's a 57% chance to hit, with also a 35% chance to block. The only hope we have against him is that he runs out of stamina and we just, wear him down quickly. But the higher the dexterity the enemies have, the scarier things get. That's the key stat to look at when you're considering the dexterity and hit points are like the two major factors. Because if they have 121 hit points, all you need is one hit. And if they have 17 dexterity, they're going to have to get really lucky to finish off any of your gladiators before they die. So, yeah. That's basically the whole strategy. Keep your operating costs low. Only recruit when you can comfortably do so without, risking. Because the worst case scenario, and the one time where you ever will want to go and take out a loan, is if you don't have enough when a fight comes around to bet the full amount. Actually, no, I should go ahead. Not advisable, but I'm going to actually skip all the way to the first fight, because there is actually one note. Well, first of all, so we just skipped several days. We still have 6,000, because our operating costs, we're operating at a very low expense. If I go to stable, yeah, just Rico and Barbados both leveled up. Actually, so did Tubertus. So Tubertus, he's 19, and he actually has good stats for specifically a crit build. So I think I am going to work on getting him to a crit build. The thing that he's lowest on right now is dexterity. I mean stamina, not dexterity, stamina. So we're absolutely going to give him deafness first. Deafness is just good on any gladiator. Period. Any of them. Doesn't matter. Having less stamina expense per attack means, one, if they are defensive, then that means they're able to block or dodge. Because if you don't have enough stamina, or if you're recovering that round, you don't dodge or block, even if you would have otherwise. And it also lets them attack more until they run out of stamina. So especially if they have low base stamina, going with deafness is really good. Generally, I used to go fast learner on every gladiator ever in the original, but with the remake, it is much, much more expensive to do so. But it's still viable, and the worst case scenario is you end up with a gladiator who has maxed everything, and then all you're doing is putting the 15 points into health every time they level, which is, it's not the worst. 15 health is something, but if that's all you're getting from the 5-level investment, I'd rather, again, just focus on using these gladiators to do damage. If I had a project gladiator that was young and had good, especially base health, absolutely put points into fast learner, keep them around for a long while, get their stats, super strong. Great, cool, awesome. But that's kind of whatever. So for now, I think I would definitely focus on getting his dexterity higher so that he hits very reliably. Because, yeah, if you get him to 100 or higher is a 50-50 or higher chance to hit, which is nice. Keeping in mind that he is 19 and he will be gaining 5% stats every year, I would not personally put them above about the 140 mark, like maximum 140 before they start, getting birthdays, because at 140, the 5% would be 7, which means their second birthday, if you have put points up to 140, then they will be at 150, which is the max for the rest of their prime after 2 birthdays. Whereas if you only level up to 120, for example, then every birthday they'll get 6. So it'll go up to 126. And then it'll go up to 132. And then it'll go up. So as you can see, over the years, they could reach max without actually having to put that many points into it. But that's, break points. There's a lot of ways to consider how to distribute the points. But generally the 2 best ways is agility, reflexes, and stamina, or dexterity, stamina, and strength. Those are the 2 primary paths. Building for blocker, dodger, and deafness for a defensive build lets them just not take damage. And building deafness, crit is a good way of doing, a crit build. With all the other stuff coming in based on, do they have enough hit points for the damage reduction skills? Do they have, there's a lot. There's a lot of depth to the leveling system. It's nice. I like it. So we now have him up to 46. So he has a 23% chance to hit. And he's only using now 5 stamina per swing, which means he gets 10 attacks before he has to recover. Good times. And then obviously we're going to wait to level up Rico because he's still fatigued, so we don't know what his actual stats are. Pretty sure he does have low enough dex that it is worthwhile to go for focus, but whatever. So, last thing I'm going to cover before I call this already kind of too long video. But I feel like I have definitely given you all the tools you need to succeed. It's not that, hard of a concept. Just keep your operating costs low, win your bets, have a merry day. But when you go in to pick a fight, these are where you're actually going to get kind of okay purses. So the fight purse is 1,300, which is not much, but it is enough in and of itself to cover your operating expenses. Which means when you choose somebody and you do the full side bet, whatever you make off that bet is going to be in addition to the fight purse that alone covers your expenses, which is cool. But we can look at Fadia. We can see that we have a 1-to-1 with him, a 1-to-1 with him, a 2-to-1 with him, and a 2-to-1 with him. So we can then go and look at Fadia. And Fadia is right here. She has a 27 dex with 219 hit points, but she only has 11 stamina. So that's actually probably going to be very easy for us to win. She's going to run out of stamina very, very quickly. And it's going to be even better if we put somebody like Tubertus, who's basically guaranteed to hit, compared to somebody like Solanus, who is less likely to hit. Also, he has he has stamina comparable to hers, so this would actually be a much closer fight than I would like. This wouldn't be as close of a fight. I think Barbados would be fine. But Barbados is also more reliable, I think, than Tubertus, as far as putting him against other low dexterity people. Tubertus is going to be good for quick kills, though, and quick kills means less chance of them being fatigued too terribly long after. So, here we go, Tubertus, 2-1. Generally, if you have a 2-1 odds, you're probably going to win. And we're going to go defensive because Tubertus has a higher hit chance. We don't want to get hit really hard if she does get a lucky hit early on. Because with the Spatha, that's 97, and if we go back and look at her again, we can figure out exactly how much damage she's going to do. So with 52, that's an extra 26 damage on top of her weapon. And again, her hit chance is 13, more or less. So if we go to the fight, we know she has a 13% hit chance, and if she hits, she's going to do about 120 damage. So, knowing that Tubertus has 300 hit points, if we go defensive, even if she gets 2 lucky hits very early on, the defensive is going to cut that down so he can survive even another lucky hit. Because the defensive will drop it down below 100 damage, so he'll be able to take 3 hits before he's at risk of dying to the next one. Whereas with his almost 50% hit chance, he's going to be hitting a lot more frequently, and as a result, probably killing her without too much difficulty. So, here we go. See, she got a lucky hit, which would have been a lot worse if we weren't fighting defensive. And that's probably the only hit she gets. There we go. There we go. So, easy win, and because of that, we just made so much money. So we're at 1,400 per day, and we were at 16,700. Which, again, the goal for this particular playthrough would be to get one or both of the younger gladiators here that are very expensive but potentially have really high stats. And actually, I will just go ahead and... Don't do this. Don't ever do this. But I'm going to take out this loan specifically because I am curious. Surya here. Regulus is rating him at really good except for dexterity. And we hire him. We get actually one of the best Spathas we could possibly get. We get terrible Secutor, whatever. Unfortunately, since we're hiring him when we don't have all the smiths, it's just going to stay at 109, but that still makes it the best or the highest damage weapon we've got, which is cool. He has 362 health. Ooh, yeah. See, this is an example of why it's risky to go for the more expensive gladiators. 64, 96, 128, 161, 189. With 362 hit points. He's comparable to Tubertus. But we paid half as much for Tubertus. So yeah, perfect example. Perfect example. And then now, because we took out that loan, if we did continue playing, that would be an extra 242 per day. Which is significant. And then the fact that we used it to buy another gladiator means our gladiators, we're now paying more for our gladiators. So we're up to 1,900 per day, compared to the 1,400 we were at. It's literally just a matter of keeping your costs low until you get a nice stockpile of money, at which point you can start doing some slightly more reckless spending. But even as it is, without having upgraded the stable any, without having hired a bunch of doctors and trainers and everything, we're still in a solid financial position. Because the 1,900, we've got 5 days essentially worth of funding. Now, obviously, if we hadn't bought him, we would have been much better off. But even with the loan, even having taken out the loan to hire a gladiator, which is inadvisable, we're still in an okay situation. Especially considering that we did skip like a week of potential fights with animals to just get in to show that you can go and you can just completely disregard. And you can go and look. So we can look at Porcia. We can look at Blasius. and we can look at Gemulus. And we can see which of them we would prefer to fight against. Gemulus, 626 hit points, 40 dex. That's actually really scary. We do not want to fight that. His was Blasis, and then Porcia was the first one. So, Blasis, Blasis here, 82 dex, 405 hit points. Yeah, that's pretty concerning. And then we've got Porcia, who is 43 dex, 121. That's definitely the person I would go for there. So she is the safest bet to fight. We go in, we choose that. We choose somebody who we're confident can win. Again, 2 to 1 is the safest, but based on their stats, I think we are going to go with Solanus here. He does... Actually, we're going to go balanced. I believe... We can check and make sure. But I believe Porcia will get one shot by him. She has 121 hit points. Solanus only has a 24% chance to hit. We can actually also go in and give him some stuff before we do it. But just hypothetically, he's got a 24% chance to hit. If he hits, he does 115 damage. So we could even equip him with a better weapon. Worth noting, and very important to keep in mind, if he loses and dies, we lose the weapon and armor he's using. So, this is a risky venture, but if we're putting, and by the way, if you don't have enough, you can't bet. If you are broke, you can't bet, which means the primary way of getting money is gone, and you're in trouble. So, unless you're taking out a loan to be able to do side bets, it's generally best to not take out loans. But we're going to go with Solanus. We're going to bet 6,300, which is triple. No, even more than triple. It's 5 times or so the fight purse. But we're going to go balanced. He should be able to kill her in one hit. And we're going to enter the arena. So all he has to do is hit her once before she hits him like 6 times. Or 4 times. Or 5 times. Whatever the case may be. I miscalculated. Oh, there we go. Yeah, he was executed because he was not... He did not get lucky. He was dramatic, which is, I believe, the highest. But he got killed. So now we lost our best Spatha. And this is how a playthrough can get out of control really fast. We lost our best Spatha. Luckily, he wasn't using our best Murmillo. Ah, right. That's where my calculation messed up. I forgot she was wearing armor. I just looked at her stats and not at the armor she was wearing. So the damage reduction from her armor and from her agility and reflexes is why we didn't one-shot her. And because of that, we lost. But it's fine. This is clearly just a great example of what not to do. Because now we lost our best weapon, our highest damage Spatha. Gone. Just because we lost one fight. We also lost the bet, which again, we were betting 4 or 5 times what we can get from each purse. And since we already took out the loan, we have no way of coming back from this, really. Because that loan is not available anymore, because we don't have another loan for 51 days, that means when we go in and we're betting, not so bad here, but whenever we get to the next, actually that's just a great example. So we're out of money. Our gladiators will start abandoning us if we're not paying them, unless we want to turn our place into a prison, which costs money per day. If you build up fortification and guards to keep them from escaping, you're paying money per day to keep them around. So, yeah. Now, if it was possible to choose to not pay them, to just go, no, I'm not going to pay any of my gladiators, then maybe the whole building up your, stable into a prison would be a viable strategy, but it's really not. It's just not. Because if you're winning fights, which is the only way you're going to be able to maintain finances, unless you're losing all your fights or betting against them, you're never going to be able to, succeed. So building up a prison is less than advisable. But yeah, so we have a strong fight here. We can't bet anything because we have nothing to bet. Which means the most we can possibly get is 1472. Which, if you'll remember, is less than what we're paying out every single day. So there is no way to recover from this. Like, even if we win every single fight, we would have to then turn around and put the money into bets, however, and hope that we were able to crawl back out of the massive deficit. Because here we go. We fought a fight and an animal fight, and we're only at 3,000. In turn, we're back to 1,400. And if we fight animals, the fight purse is not going to pay our bills. The side bets is how we'll be able to pay our bills day to day. This is the point where you want to have the loan available as a backup, because if you get to the next fight and you can't bet on it, you're going to lose. So I've already thrown this playthrough away by skipping so many days of not doing the exhibition matches and, you know, obviously throwing a fight because I was like, yeah, here's a 1-to-1. Yes, I would have gotten paid out a lot more, but because I lost that money instead of just getting paid out less. So in general, if you remember nothing else, never send your gladiators in against other gladiators unless it's 2-to-1 odds or better. And just be aware that the better the odds are that you're going to win, the less you're going to get paid for it. So you kind of want to maintain gladiators around the 2-to-1 chances, 2-to-1 odds. But you can build effective builds that, you know, aren't the standard build up dexterity, hit them more than they hit you, win. And I don't think I have anything else to discuss other than just perks. When you start winning, once you're already winning, you know, it's just win more. You can either go with purse amounts. Remember, it's a percentage. So the earlier in the game you use the purse amounts, the worse off you are because, yeah, at the beginning of the game you saw like 1,200 purse, 5,000 purse. This 20% increase is negligible. Betting amount increase, on the other hand, could potentially be a massive boost to building up solid finances. That said, it also is more money you're risking if a fight goes wrong. So the better way to manage your finances is to just control the odds. It's fine to go for 1-to-1 odds on animal fights, especially if you have a solid build that is 1-to-1, but you have a build that you can rely on to win against an animal. Then the levels, generally, I think that the gladiator levels is the worst thing, unless you just never do missions, in which case that's the worst. But gladiator levels, not great. Specifically because the higher level they are, the more they cost. Fatigue reduction is amazing. Very much helpful. Being able to send them into fights twice as often is just nice. Reputation boost, one-time boost, not super useful, in my opinion, unless you're in a position where you're about to expand your stables. If you're about to get another 5 slots and you want to hire a whole bunch of gladiators, absolutely, 2,500 reputation will most assuredly help you get the reduced costs, which will save you a massive amount. And other than that, just gladiator damage. Gladiator health, keep in mind, it will slightly increase the cost of every gladiator you have, but the damage does not, and it's just 20% more damage. But once you put the 10 points into it, that's 20% increased damage, period, for the rest of the game. That, in my opinion, because there is no attached cost other than the perk cost. You have to, as you get more perks, you have to pay for each one, so you do end up paying for it. But it's a damage increase that does not increase your upkeep costs. And that damage increase can very easily translate to wins that you otherwise would have lost. So, in my opinion, that's the best. Fatigue reduction is definitely the best first investment, unless you have a massive stable, which you generally only have from starting with the 50% fighter cost. So yeah, that's it. I literally can't think of another thing to say. Despite the sponsoring the fights is just, it goes from 20% to 40%. So for every day, there is currently, you know, without sponsoring, there's a 20% chance of a fight on any given day. If you sponsor, it's a 40% chance. So you get basically on average twice as many fights, which is cool. Advancing to the city, you either have to kill off all the gladiators all the other bosses have, or pay a large fee. The first city, I absolutely recommend just killing them all off because their stats are so low that you should, once you get a couple of solid gladiators and you start training the gladiators you started with, you should be able to very reliably win the bets, make the money, further improve the stable of gladiators you have. Again, without upgrading. This is a mid to late game thing. The food, shelter, and sleeping. You really don't need to worry about it. You're much better off, instead of upgrading your stables, you're much better off just getting, for example, this trainer. Because if times get hard and you're struggling to make your daily cost, you can fire him and no longer pay that. Whereas the stable, yeah, you're stuck with the additional cost forever. So 200 a day, and in exchange for that 200 a day, the training costs went up to 10%. Versus, we can't hire him because we can't afford him. So I believe 400 is close to the 10%. So it's more per day than just upgrading the stable, but it has the backup plan of you can fire him. Whereas the stable, you're kind of stuck. So upgrading the stables, generally not a great plan. All right, I think that's everything. I think that is absolutely everything. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I doubt anyone else is going to be making this much of a guide. I might also do a playthrough at some point. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But for now, that's been a guide for Age of Gladiators Reforged. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have a good one.